Precautions for sight unseen. Many of Dylan and Heidi and Scott, you have all mentioned that you have sold properties, quote, sight unseen. And I kind of want to bring this up a little bit to talk about it on this and anything else that you have to say about that. This one says, from Rich from Oregon says, I'm looking to purchase property, land, no structure, sight unseen. What precautions do you recommend for such a purchase process? What recommendation? What if I find a property with a structure? So let's talk about this overall. If you're going to be buying sight unseen, what are you going to, what's the typical profile that you've seen that's been successful in buying sight unseen? And what kind of recommendations would you have for someone sight unseen? And this is the Maui background. This is the, by the way, folks, this view here is sunrise over Haleakala, which is an amazing trek you all need to do at least once in your life on the bucket list. Heidi, first of all, have you ever been to the Haleakala sunset? I'm sure you have. I want a Haleakala sunrise. I want to hear about that. And then tell us what to think about on sight unseen purchases. You're muted. There you go.
Well, first of all, I definitely recommend watching the sunrise on Haleakala. You will have to wake up really early for that, but it's totally worth it. And it is one of the places on Maui where it is extremely cold. It's about, I think, generally about 40 degrees up there. So bring your jacket. But you can also bike down Haleakala, which I've done a couple times, and I highly recommend that too.
How's that? I saw that. I always wondered about that. Is that fun?
It is. So you start at the top. The first part of the bike ride it can be a bit scary. There's a lot of switchbacks. And this is not a bike ride where you're really exerting yourself. You're basically rolling downhill and trying to brake so you don't run off the road for most of the time. But you start up in Haleakala and you just get to see so many different parts of Maui, and you go through upcountry, and you can really take your own pace too and stop at different places to eat and check out farms and things like that. So it's really fun. I've done it a few times, and I highly recommend it.
I'll have to do that. All right, let's get down to business there. Sight unseen. Heidi, what's your advice for sight unseen? What are precautions? What are things, what works, what doesn't work? What's your advice?
Well, first of all, really great question. Especially during last year, 2020, I had quite a few sight unseen sales. I would say the most typical profile of the sight unseen buyer for me has been somebody that's really familiar with the neighborhood or the condominium complex, or has vacationed on Maui many times, and they kind of have a pretty good idea of what they're buying. Now, as far as like actually looking at the property, there's so much we can do with technology, with video, with 3D tours. I often FaceTime my clients, do walkthroughs with them. And I mean, I think it's important to have a good buyer's agent, because I feel my responsibility as buyer's agent is just to, especially with sight unseen, just tell somebody every single thing I see that could, possibly be a problem or an issue. And you never know what's going to be important to somebody, right? What's important to one person might not be as important to somebody else. So it's really important to have a good buyer's agent. I think the biggest thing, though, is understanding the area. Is access to the property along windy road? How far out is it? Is it somewhere you're going to be comfortable with? Does the neighbor across the street drive a school bus and park their school bus right across the street? What do the neighbors' houses look like? I mean, you really want to not only look at the house, because usually the listing agent will have pretty good pictures of the actual property, but you want your buyer's agent to also help you understand the area, the access to the property, and everything that's around it. Because I think that really makes a difference too.
Excellent. Thanks, Heidi. Great advice. Scott, how do you deal with your clients who are buying sight unseen? What things can you add to what Heidi's already said?
Yeah, so I actually have this situation right now, which is pretty interesting. So we're in escrow. Not only are we sight unseen, but it's tenant occupied. The tenant won't allow us in for home inspection. Won't allow anybody in at all. No appraisal, no TIR, termite inspection, no home inspection. We cannot go through it. The tenant was nice enough to walk through and do basically a Zoom meeting, a FaceTime meeting with us. He did give us access to the outside of the property so we could do some investigation and whatnot. And we made sure we overdid it on that side. But that client had come here. They knew the neighborhood. They knew the area. They had spent a fair amount of time here, so they knew exactly where they wanted. The biggest issue for me was sight unseen is not the property. We can analyze, we can cover the property, give you enough video, give you enough angles, photos, whatever you need, do our due diligence on the document side to pretty much make sure the property itself is what you want. To me, the bigger issue is the surrounding area. If you're not familiar and haven't spent a fair amount of time here and aren't familiar with that neighborhood, the neighborhood you want to be in, I don't recommend it, because there's no way for us as the agent to be able to go through and explain to you several miles worth of the neighborhood details and finite things that you should know. You need to know that already. The property itself to me is not as big of a concern. I can get home inspectors, PV inspector. I can go down to building department, pull plans, permits, the whole 9 yards. That's easy, and show you video. It's the surrounding area. The more familiar you are with the area, the easier I can make that process for you, and while reducing your risk that you're going to make a mistake. If you're going to spend $1 million, $500,000, or whatever, that's a big commitment. And buying a home is putting roots in some place. You want to make sure you're buying the right place and don't regret it once you move here.
Yeah, great point. So that theme is people that have come here often and are familiar with the neighborhood. That's what Heidi said. That's what you said. Dylan, what do you say? What's the advice you have? What's been your experience, success, failures, etc., with sight unseen purchases?
So I totally agree with what all Scott and Heidi said. With having to be familiar with the area, the property, the neighborhoods, all of that stuff. The thing I would like to touch on, especially in the market right now, is what buying sight unseen means to your negotiating ability or your ability to get a property that's competitive. Because what I'm seeing is when there are 25 showings in 2 days and 16 offers, the sight unseen ones kind of get put to the side because the sellers don't feel as comfortable agreeing to a sale to somebody who hasn't even seen the property, even though we've done the video and the 360 tour and they are familiar with the area. If there's a competitive offer that is equal or a little bit better than a sight unseen offer, you're not even going to get considered, especially if it's sight unseen when you're making the offer, and then you're going to come and look at the property during the property inspection, because that is like a huge red flag to a seller where, okay, so I'm going to accept this offer, take it off the market, wait 10 days for them to get here. They get here and they decide they don't like it, right? Or they get here and they look at 2 other houses and they like another house better, they cancel on me, right? So it's really a complicating factor in a seller's mindset. And so, if it's a condo complex and you're really familiar with it and it's not competitive, absolutely, we can make that happen. But in this market right now, it really hurts your ability to be competitive when you're making an offer. And I'm seeing that regularly where, we do submit strong sight unseen offers, but sellers just feel more comfortable going with someone who they could see, feel, and touch that had actually been to the property.
Go ahead, Scott.
To touch on that real quick, yeah, that's absolutely right. The Hawaii purchase contract is very pro-buyer. There's many milestones that the buyer has a chance to back out, and that's where the concern gets. And in fact, in that Kaneohe property that I offered on, and I think we were 100 grand over, and we were in second position, and they accepted one from somebody who was sight unseen. And then when they got here, they changed their mind. And now the listing agent calls me, hey, your client's still interested? I called my client to go, nope, we emotionally moved on from that. We're not interested now. So now that listing agent is chasing all those people who were so emotionally invested on trying to get that property, and they mentally walked away from it at that point. He's reeling. It's not in the seller's best interest to take a sight unseen offer because of that risk, because it's not only that contract, but it's everybody else that was interested that started to walk away from that property.
So so what I'm hearing you all say then on this one is that in addition to like making sure that you're really comfortable with the neighborhood, it well, et cetera, and you're working with a good agent who can represent you correctly and look at and do the other things that Heidi had mentioned, does the school bus park across the street, et cetera. in these times right now, in this bananas market, as Dylan is saying, any excuse to sort of not take you as a serious buyer is going to put someone else ahead of you. So it's really working against you. Therefore, sight unseen is a higher risk, less competitiveness. Yes, Dylan.
And so one more thing, Dylanism, all right, is this is
Love
what
it. Give me the Dylanism.
So if you're going to be a sight unseen buyer, this is my recommendation to you. And this is for all buyers. I give all buyers this advice, but definitely sight unseen buyers is your online dating when you're buying sight unseen, right? So what happens is you get under contract with somebody, but then you keep looking at properties and then you confuse yourself. You're like, what about this one? And what about that one? And so I tell people, real estate, once you get under contract, you're engaged, right? So you have to stop going to the bar and looking for other properties, right? You gotta be faithful to the property and until you're married, right? So that's one thing that you gotta really think about is stop the online shopping, because you're gonna confuse the heck out of yourself, thinking that maybe this one's better, than the one that I'm under contract with, and second guessing your decision because you haven't actually been there, seen it, felt it, and are really emotionally committed to it, and it can cause a little bit of an issue trying to keep folks in line and making sure that they stick to it, because that's what a seller's thinking in their minds, right? Sellers are thinking that same thing, and that's what gives them apprehension to go with a sight unseen offer.
That's right. Boy, it sounds to me like we have to have a segment about, the psychologically buying, basically buying property online, essentially, right? Which is really what we're saying, right? The dynamics of buying property online.